Okay, so we've explored a bit of color theory. Now let's get into typography. And this section is based off the work by Cameron Chapman, a very good designer and typography enthusiast. And before we get into talking about the basics, what is typography? Well, typography is the art and technique of arranging type to make written language most appealing to learning and recognition. And typography could be considered the most important part of any design. And it's definitely amongst one of the most important elements of any design project, even though it's often overlooked, especially by beginner designers. And designers are often intimidated by typography. And the goal of this section is sort of to remove that intimidation and just start with the basics and get everything down. So we're going to talk about typography theory, and that includes different types, different typefaces, as well as the basic anatomy of typeface. And the first thing I want to clear up is, well, what is the difference between fonts and typefaces? Now, a lot of people use these terms interchangeably, but they're two very distinct things. And before we get started, I want to talk about the difference. A typeface is a set of typographical symbols and characters. It's the letters, the numbers, and other characters that let us put words on paper, or in our case, a screen. And a font, on the other hand, is traditionally defined as a complete character set within a typeface, often of a particular size and style. So fonts are also specific computer files that contain all the characters and all the glyphs within a typeface. And there can be hundreds and thousands of fonts within one specific typeface. And there are a number of different ways to classify typefaces and the type of families. Now, the most common classifications are by technical style, so you have serif, sans serif, script, and display, and then a few others. Now, typefaces are also classified by other technical specifications, such as proportional versus monospace, which we'll get into in a little bit. Now, the first typeface I want to bring up is serif. And serifs are called serifs in reference to the small lines that you see attached to the main strokes of the character within the face. And they're most often used in body copy for print documents, as well as both body and headlines online. And there's been a lot of argument as to the readability of serifs online and what is the best font family for readability. And some designers prefer not to use serifs for large blocks of copy, and I myself am one of those designers. And the text you're looking at right now is an example of a serif. Now, within the serif classification, there are many subtypes. You have your old style, which is also called humanist, and the old style typeface dates back to the mid-1400s. And the main characteristic of old style is the diagonal stress, which is the thinnest parts of the letters appear on the angled strokes, rather than the vertical or horizontal ones. Now, typefaces in this category that I've included are Adobe Jensen, Centaur, and Gaudi Old Style. Now, transitional serifs date back to the mid-1700s and are generally the most common serif typeface. This is going to be your Times New Roman and your Baskerville, which are both transitional serifs. Now, Georgia and Bookman are also transitional serifs. The difference between thick and thin strokes in transitional typefaces are more pronounced than they are in old serif styles, but less so than in the modern ones that we're going to look at. Now let's take a look at some modern serifs. And these typefaces would include fonts like Didit and Bodoni, and I'm not sure how many fonts you guys have actually used, but they have a much more pronounced contrast between the thin and the thick lines, and have a vertical stress and minimal brackets. And these date back to the late 1700s. The final main type of serif typeface that we're going to talk about is slab serif. And slab serifs have little to no contrast between thick and thin lines, and have thick rectangular serifs, and a lot of times have a fixed width. These most resemble serif fonts that we're going to look at in just a moment.